Let me put that directly back to Sam then. How do you respond?
Well, of course, there's conditionality. The question, I think he missed the point. The question is which conditions? The question is what conditionality? Austerity measures, solvency and liquidity-orientated programs are only one of a whole palette of possibilities. And this option has been consistently chosen by the IMF, invariably in a variety of contexts, in a variety of countries. And I think in total it's counterproductive. The second point is that of moral hazard. I have witnessed time and again in many countries in Central and Eastern Europe and in Africa where I used to work, politicians implementing wrong policies, misallocating resources and absconding with funds, pointing the finger at the IMF, blaming the IMF for later austerity measures they have to implement to rectify what they have done.
And that is
so there is a shift of responsibility, and that's what we call moral hazard in economics.
And to a certain extent, let's go back to Adrian in Bucharest, to a certain extent that's one of the problems of Romania, is the problem of corruption is what is fueling some of the unrest on the streets, isn't it? Has the IMF's conditionality been part of the problem in this whole setup, do you think?
Basically, the IMF in Romania is not perceived as being the one to blame for what's happening in the country. The IMF is perceived to be more like a watchdog over the money that has been lended to Romania. And the fear of corruption is always one of the first words that come up when you speak about the Romanian state. The Romanian state is perceived to be a part of people which are very corrupt, which don't use the resources as they should be, and the IMF basically wants to know what they do with the money. And I don't think that the people out in the streets are protesting against the IMF or the measures that the IMF told the Romanian government to take, but they are protesting against the government, the members of the government and
but isn't that the point? I mean, the people on the streets might not be protesting against the IMF, but isn't the point here that the government is corrupt and taking funds from the IMF one way or another is actually helping that process?
Yes, but I don't think that people that got out on the streets at this moment got out because the government is corrupt. Basically, they saw in the last 3 years the government taking some very harsh measures. Last year there has been a cut of 25% in the salaries of the people working in the public sector and an increase of 5% in VAT. People didn't go out on the streets at that moment, which is very surprising to me. Although those were the measures that affect them the most. And now they are going out because I think they say enough is enough,
right,
and we want some change.
All right,
but I don't think that there are enough people there.
Sam, let me ask you to comment on those reflections. Do you agree with that analysis?
Sorry?
Do you agree with that analysis from Adrian Ion?
Well, vehemently no, I do not agree. The austerity measures, people started protesting in the streets of Bucharest and later in other cities against the implementation of the healthcare reform, privatization of certain emergency services. That was one of the conditions and requirements of the IMF in the 2009 agreement. In every repeated report that the IMF issued, including the report in December 2011 and the report in October 2011, the IMF mentions that progress should be made on privatizing healthcare and reforming the tax administration. All the austerity measures implemented since the recession of 2009-10, all of them, without a single exception, have been dictated by the IMF. Now, that is not to say that these measures are entirely wrong, that some of them are not productive, that they should not have been, but they came from the IMF. They emanated from the IMF. People are protesting in the streets against the personality of Băsescu, who is authoritarian and unpleasant and so on and so forth, but they are also protesting against austerity measures and privatization measures and lack of functioning institutions and so on and so forth, that are a direct, unequivocal, unambiguous consequence of an agreement signed with the IMF in 2009. Period.
All right.
That's as simple as that.
Well, Piotr, you mentioned earlier on a good point in response to Sam, and that is that no one lends money without there being conditions because they want to make sure they get it back. But I want you to respond to Sam's point there that, yes, okay, there should be conditions, but do they necessarily need to be these conditions that have so often been shown to actually harm the people who live in the countries that are being imposed, the conditions are imposed on?
Well, I would put it this way. I share actually most of what has been said, and I don't contradict what has been said before. But what I want to underline is the following. The IMF conditionality is going to be working only if it's done together with the local government, in this case with the Romanian government. If it is the IMF telling the Romanians what to do, it's probably not going to work properly, because nobody knows best how Romania functions than Romanians themselves. Therefore, IMF is not going to be fully successful in protecting its money if it tells what should be done to the local people. But it's not the IMF who are elected people. It is the local governments who are elected. And they hold the responsibility and they hold the legitimacy. And they have to always keep on board the society at large. Therefore, it is their responsibility to convey the messages and to be prepared whenever those discussions, those negotiations happen. And we see that it's never easy. And there's plenty of conflicts everywhere, in Greece, in Romania to a lesser degree, in Hungary, in Italy as well, in Spain obviously, but those tensions are inbuilt. And now it is the responsibility of the political class to make sure that they know what they really want from the IMF, not only the money, but what sort of austerity measures they can take and what sort of austerity measures they cannot take. And they should know it best when they sit together with the IMF.
All right, well, Adrian, let me come to you. You say that the population and presumably the government doesn't blame the IMF for the problems that the country has had. But in a broader sense...
Not entirely, at least.
In a broader sense, though, tell us what the government and the people of Romania think about their membership of the EU. Do they think that being part of this body that right now is fighting for its very life was a good move and will prove to be beneficial for them in the future?
I wouldn't know how to answer to that, because I don't think they really have a clear idea. Being member of the EU until now for the Romanians only meant easier access abroad, easier access of goods, but we haven't really been affected like in the way, for example, Greece was by adopting the euro or other measures which were, for example, for Greece or other countries seen as being as having a negative impact on the population. So I don't think that Romanians have anything against Romania joining the EU.
All right, but Piotr, very quickly, let me turn the question around to you and ask, from the EU perspective, is there any problem with Romania's membership? I mean, there are so many peripheral countries now who are proving to be a burden on the EU itself. Might Romania be seen in that light at some point?
Well, I guess retrospectively quite a few people think that 2007 enlargement was premature, if not entire 2004 and 2007 enlargements at all. I don't share that view. Romania is a full-scale member of the European Union. It's not part of the euro area, but it is a member of the European Union with all the rights and obligations. And again, if there are obligations when it comes to the membership in the European Union, it might be that the political class missed that part when discussing the issue with the public at large, only promising the goodies and forgetting about the sticks. They promised, for example, in Romania, the lifting of the border controls, and we see how difficult that is. That's not going to be easy, and it's been what 5 years now that Romania is in the European Union, and Schengen is still at least a few months away.
We're almost out of time, so I'll put the final question to Sam. Sam, you brought up the issue of the Washington Consensus and criticized it for its effects and its general tenor. So tell us, given in a world where the Washington Consensus still seems to be the driving motive, the driving force of economic policy, where are we going now? Not just in Romania, but in the other European nations where so much problem is going on. How do you read the developments from this point onwards?
I just want to say one thing. Negotiations in the context of talking to the IMF is a euphemism. The IMF dictates. The IMF does not negotiate. Without the imprimatur of the IMF, no country can borrow money in the international markets, country in distress. So these are diktats. They are not negotiations, negotiated agreements. And the local politicians are absolutely helpless and hapless and unable to resist the IMF pressure if they really need the money. If the Washington Consensus is implemented in its full severity throughout the European Union, and I'm talking even about countries such as France and Germany, believe it or not, because they are, in my view, about to enter the crisis full scale, then Europe will be devastated. I have seen the Washington Consensus implemented in another continent, in Africa.
Right.
I have seen the Washington Consensus implemented in southeastern Europe, in the Balkans. And that's not a sight to behold.
All right.
The Washington Consensus safeguards the banks, not the countries.
A sobering point on which to end this discussion. Thanks very much to all three of our guests. In Bucharest, Adrian Ion; in Brussels, Piotr Kaczynski; and in Skopje, Sam Vaknin. And thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. And if you want to send us any feedback, just email your thoughts to insidestory@aljazeera.net. That's it for now. Until next time, bye-bye.